Welcome to Daily Exchange. We're talking with Jimmy Newton here, and we're talking all about BSV and scaling and all the patents involved. See you guys right after this. Bitcoin SV and mining. Now, I guess just recent news, we've had two 128 megabyte blocks mined.
This past week in the last couple of days.
Brilliant. Yeah. And that's a big deal. I believe it's the biggest block of any blockchain ever, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, everything that's been done on Bitcoin SV, since we started getting to 32 and then 50, 60 megabyte blocks, and now we've passed the 100 megabyte block barrier, have been the largest blocks ever mined in any public blockchain.
Wow, incredible.
So now, record, and it started on last Thursday, March 28th, it was 113 meg, which was the world record that sat for basically a day or two, and then two 128 meg blocks have been mined.
So, and then let's just talk about in comparison. So Bitcoin's blocks are 1 meg. Ethereum's are about 0.8 of a meg. This is sort of every 10 minutes, just to give context, because Ethereum blocks don't come out they come out every 15 seconds. I guess as we get bigger and bigger, these block sizes are going to get much larger. And then obviously we need to store all of that information. There's been some questions, and I just want to help understand and clarify this. Is how does I guess SV plan on miners storing these large blocks and things like that? I guess and it may seem in some sense that the Bitcoin blockchain is 197 gigabytes currently,
right?
After 10 years. And I guess some people, in general could download that. It takes a while. And then you've got to, install and things like that. But, with these larger blocks, if we had 128 megabyte blocks for 10 years, that'd be about 25 terabytes. Now that's a lot. I actually just recently upgraded my gaming PC to have a 1 terabyte hard disk, but that's a whole other story. And I'm just trying to understand, it doesn't really, I don't think this means that, who do you see as the miners of the future of BSV?
Well, I have two responses to that. First, by dispelling another huge misconception that I think people have about what we're doing, especially the big block plan. Your question assumes that Satoshi intended, and Bitcoin was always intended to have every miner maintain a full copy of the blockchain, right? And every node or every user on the network maintaining a full copy of the blockchain. That's not what I think the future is meant for. If you read the white paper, it clearly envisioned SPV, simplified payment verification wallets, right? And nodes operating on the system. You could take the current 197 gigabyte full BTC blockchain, and you could have a prune node where the miner or other users on the other type of user nodes, such as a merchant, right? Or some payment gateway on Bitcoin. And that would be 2.3 gigabytes. And that's really all you would really need, because once you download the blockchain maybe once, you can kind of just start it, and you only need the UTXO set in order to be able to process transactions and mine future blocks. And so there's this assumption that everyone participating on the network has to have the full blockchain at all times. That's just not true. Right. And Satoshi envisioned that clearly in the white paper, with the idea that SPV wallets and nodes would come into being. Some of the early Satoshi writings on the message boards make clear that not everyone is going to need the full blockchain. And I think people forget that, and they think there's something wrong with not maintaining the whole blockchain. But we're here to tell you that, having a prune node at 2.3 gigabytes versus BTC's 197 gigabyte is just going to be just as secure. And it's think about it, it this way: do all companies run around keeping a copy of everything, of all the data that's relevant to their business? No, they access parts of it when needed. The other thing, second thing that will happen is we'll move to a world where there will be some miners who specialize, right? Most miners are not going to want to keep the full blockchain, especially let's say these big blocks are being mined because people are uploading high resolution images or other big files like music files or video files. Great. Not everyone wants to keep that, but some miners can make a really good business in the future by charging specialized fees for access to the full set of the blockchain, right? You're going to move to specialized mining. And different users, not the miners, let's say merchants and payment gateways, will start paying different types of fees for different types of services, depending on the type of data they want to access that was on the blockchain. And so this is just going to create competition in a competitive marketplace where some people will see value in it. Think about the analogy to the internet, right? We would love to have a more complete web archive, right, of all past websites and pages, how they might have existed in a point of time. But nobody's incentivized to keep that, right? But if someone was financially incentivized to keep that all, there's an interesting business model that could be made out of that.
Right. And so, let's say someone wants to store something on some large files. And they could obviously opt potentially to put it on BSV or potentially, some cloud hosting platform. Can you talk us through, because I think this is a really interesting service in the future. How do you see that world of, I guess, operating? How do you see those two things comparing in the future?
Yeah, think about it this way. Right now, first of all, I don't want people to think that we are advocating that everyone put every file ever on the BSV blockchain, right? It is not necessarily intended for that. It can be used for that if you want it to be. But think about cloud storage today. We pay a monthly fee to someone, right? Dropbox, Amazon Web Services, to get a certain amount of data and store our files to there. But you have to pay it on an ongoing basis to maintain access to it. We have something like the BSV blockchain. You may pay a little bit more upfront, at least under today's current fees, to upload something to the blockchain, but it's permanently there. And if some miners, which some will, maintain the full blockchain, they can charge you a fee for access to it later. That over time is going to be less than paying a monthly fee for an ongoing cloud service operation, right? Where you have constant access to it, because you're paying to upload it, and then you may pay a small fee in the future every time you need to access it from a service that still has it. So over time, I think you'd actually create a more efficient way to store things. But again, let me repeat, it's not my intention to sit here and have the world think that we think the BSV blockchain is going to just become the world's data storage. It can be, and there will probably be some instances where it is more efficient and more useful to store files on the BSV blockchain, and there'll be some instances where it'll be perfectly fine to store it through other means.
Makes sense. Okay, and let's
finally, I do want to point out, you asked who's going to be the miners in the future, because there's this, I think, bias in the Bitcoin world about centralizing miners, right? First of all, we think centralization and what Bitcoin solved was more about taking a central authority out of the role of dictating how money was issued and who could participate in the financial system. So the number of miners doesn't relate to that. As far as whether or not there's too much central power with miners, what people forget is when you look at those pie charts on CoinDance or whatever service to see where the mining hash is coming from, most of those are pools. They're not individual miners. And within each of those pools, there can be thousands and thousands of individual miners, right? And so while it may look like there are 4, 5, 10, whatever, 15 groups on the pie chart, a lot of those are individual miners who at any time can move their hash to any other pool if they don't like positions being taken by that mining
I think we've got those graphs here, Jimmy. I don't know if Joel, you want to bring those up as well. So this is the Bitcoin SV chart. I know, Jimmy, we haven't quite got it there. We've got SV pool with 20%, CoinGeek 15, BMG with 12.5, mempool 4.8, pooling at 2.75, and then other other mining pools. And then if we look at the BTC, it's kind of similar. BTC.com is.
But when you look at the BTC one, what I want people to really look at is they think of that as, oh, well, it's got more, chunks of the pie chart, but all of those have a whole bunch of individual miners in them for the most part, right? And there are some corporate miners in there. But the idea of that, small miners can't participate is really wrong. How small miners participate now is they join a pool to mitigate against the risk of not hitting a block. They increase their chances of hitting blocks and earning money by being part of a pool. Going forward, do I think Bitcoin mining is going to be for every person in their home office or in their garage? No. And Satoshi envisioned this. As blocks get bigger, it's going to move to more big scale server farms. That's what is happening. You can still participate in a pool, but the ability to individually mine on your own is probably not going to be economically feasible. And that's okay. It doesn't mean Bitcoin becomes centralized. It means in order to grow, to be used by 5 billion people across the world, let's be realistic. We need a network that can be sustained by large pools as well as large corporate miners. And that's okay. But you can still participate by being part of a pool, which is exactly what's happening today. And people need to remember that when they look at those pie charts.
Brilliant.
And final thing I will point out is just over the last day, you're showing the chart for BSV. It doesn't have a mining pool that just emerged over the last couple of days called K-Pool, which has now become the second largest mining pool within just today on Bitcoin SV.
Brilliant.
So we've got a big new entrant, which is great.
Awesome. And I think that's obviously, Bitcoin SV is much newer, and it's obviously growing and evolving at the same time.
It's new, and I have talked to other mining pool operators who are interested in starting to mine Bitcoin SV. They're preparing for it. If and when they do it, I don't know. But it's only been 4 months, since the hard fork. So it'll grow, it'll happen, and we look forward to more diversity. We welcome and encourage more people, more pools to start mining.
Brilliant. Now, one of the things we've had another couple of questions around is of recent, potentially, and I'm not sure, the mathematics around this, it's hearsay to some extent, around mining right now might be, I guess, potentially of low profitability today. And I think, how do you see the world, I guess, the mining evolving, when there's sort of, the next halvening coming up, and I guess fees need to cover to some extent the mining costs. How do you sort of see that playing out?
I'm glad you asked that question, because this is exactly one of the big reasons why we fought the hash war last year. We felt that the Bitcoin Cash lead development group was not being fast and aggressive enough in increasing the block size and scaling that blockchain bigger. And as we explained at the time, and as I continue explaining today, we want bigger blocks, not just because we think it's cool to say, oh gosh, we have 128 megabyte blocks. We know that it is critical to ensure that mining profitability stays when the block reward halves next year in 2020, and then every several years after that. Because next year, when we go down from 12.5 coins to 6.25 coins as the block reward, miners have to make up that lost value of the 6.25 coins or something close to it, if not more, in something else. We can't automatically just assume the price keeps jumping up enough to offset it.
Yeah.
And Satoshi envisioned this early on. That's why you have this process by which the block reward cuts in half every few years. And Satoshi envisioned that the difference needs to be made up in increased usage and transaction fees. And because you want the individual transaction fee to be very small so that people use Bitcoin, you need to fit more and more amounts of transactions of different data types, not just payments, but smart contracts, tokens, these large file uploads into blocks. That means they have to get bigger to fit the larger amount of transactions which are necessary for the miners to make transaction fees that they get on top of the block rewards. So when it goes down from 12.5 to 6.25 coins, they need to get more money in coins from transaction fees. And a perfect example of this already happening on Bitcoin SV is with these 128 megabyte blocks, the ones that got mined over the last 2 days. The block reward is 12.5 coins. The miners' transaction fees were about 1.27 to 1.3 BSV, which means they got 10% more than the block reward. That's not necessarily going to be enough longer term, but it's a lot more than they were getting for other blocks. And it shows that the transaction fees, as they're growing in terms of overall volume, can help sustain mining in the future. And that's critical. I think people need to understand this is not just because we go, oh, yeah, we want a bigger blockchain. No, it's because the economic incentive model of Bitcoin will only thrive and miners will only provide the security and computing power for the network if they get more transaction fees by bigger blocks to fit in more transactions of different data types. No other blockchain will survive. This is why all of the other blockchain projects, like Ethereum, for example, they just cut their block rewards with the Constantinople, upgrade, by a third. And we're looking at that going, oh my gosh, that you won't sustain mining on Ethereum, but that's because they want to move more to proof of stake model rather than proof of work model. And so this is absolutely critical. It's why we believe in big blocks. It's why later this year we're going to lift the block cap to 512 megabytes. And hopefully by the end of the year, beginning of next year, go to 1 to 2 gigabytes. It's because it's critical to the economic incentive model of Bitcoin. And we understand that, I think, better than any of the other projects. It's why Bitcoin Core, with capping the block size and moving to off-chain solutions like Lightning Network, are going to break the security model of Bitcoin. It's why Bitcoin Cash is not going to scale fast or large enough to offset the halvening. And it's going to get worse. In a few years after next year, it'll be 3 coins, right, for the block reward. You're going to really have to make that up with higher volumes of transaction fees. And they can't be big transaction fees. BTC, I just saw recently over the weekend, was again getting congested and hitting $50 to send a transaction. That's what was happening at the end of 2017, early 2018. It's starting to happen again. I just don't see how you're going to use a network if it costs $50 to send a transaction.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Do you have the sort of an upper limit for block size where you want to try and get it to?
No. No. So our goal originally, our goal long term, is no block cap, and let miners configure what block sizes they will accept themselves, and we'll create a competitive marketplace. I think that's what Satoshi envisioned. The 1 megabyte block cap that was put into the code shortly after Bitcoin emerged was supposed to be temporary. It was designed to sort of help protect the network when it was being bootstrapped and growing. It wasn't designed to be permanent. And if you look at the original, code, there's not going to be a block cap. There shouldn't be one. Miners should just decide what they want to accept. We want to ensure, of course, safe testing of the network before that happens. That's why we're not just lifting the block cap entirely. We are testing it. We are working on, for example, software tools to make it faster and better to propagate large blocks across the network, because we know just lifting the block cap doesn't solve everything. Nodes operating on the network need to be able to have better propagation. So Steve Shatters and Daniel Connolly, our top 2 developers on our node team, are working on those things. And that's a gradual process, and that's why we're doing it step by step and lifting the block cap. But eventually, we want there to be no block cap and let the marketplace decide what happens.
Makes sense. Now, I guess just to clarify, because I think a lot of people are trying to, I guess Bitcoin SV's had a bit of a turbulent birth to some extent.
Yeah.
But I just wanted to just clarify, because I think there are this is a key question we've had from the community is, who can contribute code to Bitcoin SV?
So right now, the Bitcoin SV node software is the reference implementation. It is created and managed by a team of developers at nChain on behalf of the Bitcoin Association, which I'm the founding president of. And Daniel Connolly is the lead developer. Right now, there is not open contribution to the code. However, anyone can submit a pull request and they will review it and decide if they want to act upon it. There's other ways people can contribute, including through our bug bounty program, where people have already been submitting security disclosures, which the team is reviewing. And in addition, so there are ways to contribute now. Because of its birth in a challenging situation, we did not want to open it up immediately to public contribution, but that is the plan. Later on this year, the team will open up to public contribution. I do want people to know that people can already submit a pull request, so anyone can do that now.
Brilliant.
Long term, the other thing to keep in mind is our mission is very focused. Restore the original protocol and keep it locked. That doesn't mean there can't be code improvements and code evolution over time. But this is not going to be one of those situations like in Bitcoin Cash or Bitcoin Core, where there's all this disagreements and fights over major changes, and then who controls the code makes a huge difference, right? If you're participating in Bitcoin SV, you're accepting this philosophy, block protocol, right? And so code changes certainly can be suggested to improve the code, but we're not going to be in a world where you're talking about, oh, should we shorten the block interval time, which is being discussed apparently now in Bitcoin Cash, right? Can we go down from 10 minutes to 2 minutes, right? Should we change the transaction ordering like they did with the last hard fork? Should we move to avalanche and pre-consensus, techniques that move things slightly more to proof of stake? That's just, an antithetical to our approach. But the opening for public contribution to code in our process will be happening later this year.